What is up everybody, welcome back to Elemental Gardens. Today's kind of a double episode in the sense that I'm working on both the earth and the water area of the park, and these were originally supposed to be two separate areas, or two separate episodes, as well as two separate areas, which I would work on. But in the end, I actually had to throw away some of the footage that I was making because I was working on this park pretty much constantly, and I was pumping out footage faster then I could actually render it and remove it from my hard drive. I'm also in the process of actually getting more terabytes on my hard drive, or getting new hard drive, that is. But at this point, there was no other option than throw away some footage to make room for the next episode. And what I decided to throw away was the making of the wooden roller coaster, which you see has now popped into the park. So I guess I can explain a little bit about that coaster. I decided to not show the footage of making it since it was very heavy on the trial and error. And a lot of it was just messing about with the layout, trying to perfect everything and trying to make it as smooth as I could. I also have to say this is arguably one of the smoothest, if not the smoothest coaster that I've ever made. So that's pretty cool. I'm actually quite happy with it. Obviously it does have a very simple layouts that's very easy to make smooth. It definitely doesn't have too many curves and it has very simple airtime hills, but it's a very smooth coaster and I'm quite happy with that. It has some pretty good pacing, general speed throughout the ride, and what's also quite nice about it is that it really has that sort of skyline of a traditional out and back wooden coaster to it, so in that sense I think it fits into the park quite well. And the general idea of this area over here, which I'm also kind of trying to accentuate with the little ride over here, is that this is the water area of the park. That doesn't necessarily mean that I wanted to use a water theme or water rides, but I wanted to show off the water in the game and how you can make rides interact with that, how you can use water to build rides over it, but also to make your park come together in a nicer way. Basically, the way that water looks and works in Planet Coaster is what I wanted to show off with this section of the park, because in the end, this park is also kind of made as a way to show off what you can do in Planet Coaster. Hence why I have the wooden coaster kind of on the side of a large lakeside boulevard which I've built over here. So that's also what I'll be doing throughout the rest of this area. There will be one more lake with one more roller coaster to kind of expand on that water idea, which is right here. A bit more of a sort of natural lake, also with a small island in the middle just for fun, but still kind of keeping with the idea of water. Now going back to the wooden roller coaster a little bit, because I just wanted to explain a bit more like why I went with this woodie and why I actually like it so much. It's very heavily inspired by the Intamin wooden coasters, which are very unique in a sense that they're prefab wooden coasters. Normally wooden coasters are just built on the spot and they're all constructed on the spot and put into place, but Intamin wooden coasters are actually made in pre-made pieces that are transported to the place where they're built, and then they're just kind of put together as if it were kind of like a Knack set or something like that. Which is fairly unique for wooden roller coasters. That's normally the way that steel coasters are built. But what does make that quite unique is that Intamin wooden coasters are super smooth, and also they have some very interesting layouts. This coaster in particular is inspired by the layouts of Colossus in Hyde Park and El Toro in Six Flags, though I always forget which one it was. Might have been Magic Mountain or Great Adventure, not entirely sure anymore, or a different one. But anyway, it's inspired by El Toro as well, since both coasters have a layout with very large, fast airtime hills in the beginning. And Colossus actually goes into a helix at the midpoint, and that's something that I also took into this coaster. And kind of ending with some smaller airtime hills where the ride has already lost quite a bit of speed, but still has enough speed to make its way through some pretty heavy airtime hills. So that's something that I'm doing on this coaster as well. So yeah, you can definitely probably find a lot of the Intamin inspiration in this wooden coaster, and it's definitely something that I wanted to try, also because I feel like the rails of the coaster in-game look quite a lot like the Intamin rails. Not entirely sure why that is, not sure if it's the texture or what it is. Intamin coasters do have less cross ties or planks below the rails than the in-game one does, but it does seem to fit quite nicely. And the same goes for the trains as well. They're somewhat similar, so I figured in the end I could just go with this kind of coaster and it would fit into the park. So moving on to the next area, I quickly placed the Stormbreaker, which was the Freefly coaster by S&S. The Freefly coaster which I made in the Freefly Coaster Planet Coaster College, I quickly put that over the lake because it seemed like a fun ride to have interact with the water. Obviously it's thematically resonant, I guess, and it's also just a small ride that I could place in that corner and put something in the park that's a little bit more family friendly. So we have that going on, and then next, that is pretty much all I wanted to do for the water side of the park. So next I figured I could go into the earth section. Now what I was figuring here was that I could show off the way that you can use tunnels for roller coasters, create canyons and large pits to build stuff in Planet Coaster, and also use the terrain textures to your advantage by really coloring those wooden or those rocky cliffs and really giving it an entirely different feel to it. So that's something that I'll get to in a minute, and I've sort of given an idea of with that very small pit next to the central observation tower, where each of the sides corresponding to the theme that it has on that side is going to have a small like little area inspired by that theme. So the water side has a small pond and the earth side has a small pit, and that's basically what I'll be getting into in the sort of the last section of this episode. First though, I wanted to finish the station for the Freefly coaster here. And this station is actually very largely derived from the station for the wooden coaster, since we're still kind of in the same area. And I had these pieces and colors anyway. It's very similar, very simple kind of station. But I'm actually quite happy with how it works out in terms of how the textures and everything work together to make this station one pretty nice, coherent, kind of contemporary, modern-ish building. And for a while I was figuring I could put a higher raised sort of top on top of the actual track, but in the end I feel like the glass works out a little bit better. It's a bit more subtle, it's a bit more small, and it's one way to actually use that glass piece, which is a really beautiful piece, and I've never actually used it before aside from I think a few places where I used it in Grizzly Valley, though I'm not even entirely sure if I did it there. And it's definitely a really cool piece with some good looking glass textures, so I figured why not use it and actually get some actual glass in here. So I put that in there. Did want to accentuate the ends of it a little bit, make sort of custom arch on the side here to connect to the white line of the roof station. And that is basically the very basic station design. It's super simple and it's just a box. I know that normally I totally tell everybody that you should try to make your stations look as little boxy as you can, but in this case it was really just about all I could do. Honestly, I'm kind of glad still with the way that it turned out, given the amount of time that I put into it and the amount of detail that I was willing to put into the station as well, since these things can suck a lot of items if you want to make them too detailed. But what I find generally works quite well, even if you have a very boxy station, it can still work out quite well if you actually have some nice contrasting colors on it and some detailing to still look at. So there's the very small subtle ridge to the roof, there is some pillar detailing on the walls on the bottom of the station. I think the colors work together quite nicely to give it a sort of clean, modern feel, and even though it's a boxy building, the roof extending from the top of the walls also kind of negates that sort of very boxy basic shape. So in the end, I'm actually quite happy with the building, and I guess it's a way to make your stations interesting even if you really have to go with a completely square boxy station in the end, and there's no way to get around that. So after this, I wanted to quickly get into some flat rides because I didn't have too many flat rides yet. And they're really a pretty cool sort of addition to the park, I guess. They're not too much here, they're just a good way to get more guests into an area and get more guests into the park in general, which will make the park look a bit more crowded, make it look a bit more like an actual park you want to go to, like a nice and cozy, awesome park to stay at. There's a really good Dutch word that I'm thinking of right now, but that there's no English translation of. But anybody who's Dutch probably knows what I'm talking about. Just making the park like a pretty chill place, I guess. So we're getting some people into the park, which is quite nice. And with those flat rides out of the way, we have pretty much finished the water side of the park. So I figured it's time to build myself a pit and get into the earth. And this is kind of interesting, because I have to mention that I very explicitly got some inspiration from a very old friend and favorite of mine. And by that I don't mean an actual person, as per usual I guess, but I actually mean an old ride. Anybody who's played Rollercoaster Tycoon 1, especially for those hardcore players who've played especially the first scenarios quite a lot, probably remembers Dynamite Blaster from Dynamite Dune scenario, which is this really cool mine train that goes into a very dark brownish pit in the middle of a desert. And even though this coaster is obviously not digging into a pit in the desert, it is still taking that very basic idea. So I dug out a pretty large pit, kind of like the size of Dynamite Blaster, even though I will keep some space in it so that people can actually build their own coasters in this pit as well. But that's really the basic idea. The basic idea of Dynamite Blaster, to have that mine train go through a sort of mine, sort of large pit, as if it's really excavated to extract whatever is in there, is the theme that I took for this ride. And you can probably tell a lot of the inspiration, including a drop down straight from the station, having a couple of turns, having some tunnels, then going up to the lift hill, which extends quite high above the level of the pit, and then having those very steep and large drops after the lift hill, and going down with quite a decent speed. I have to say, for a lot of this park, I was kind of trying to find a nice balance between a fun park in terms of the game and a realistic park in terms of real life. This park is definitely not realistic to begin with. First of all, there are of course the massive open spaces, but I wanted to sort of hit a balance between making the park realistic enough by making the rides based on actual manufacturers and making the layouts similar to real parks enough to make it seem like a real park for those who are interested in more the realism side of things, while at the same time still making it reminiscent of that sort of fantasy feeling which makes some of the Rollercoaster Tycoon parks so great. And I think this is something that the original Rollercoaster Tycoon scenarios hit quite well as well, and so that's also what I'm trying here. And in the layout of the coaster, I guess this kind of reflects in the fact that it winds around as if it is a mine train coaster, and I'm not really doing anything that mine trains wouldn't do, but it is on a pretty large scale. Like, this thing is faster than your average mine train would be. It has some steeper, larger drops than your average mine train would have, and even if you compare it to, say, Expedition Everest, it is quite a thrilling ride actually that could almost count as a sort of mini hyper ride. But that aside, I quite like it. Like, the idea of having a mine train that's a little bit more intense is maybe not something that you would see in any real park, but it is at least something that makes this pit a little bit more interesting and makes sort of an excuse to have a really cool intertwining mine train coaster going through a giant pit and through caves and whatever else it's doing, and that all in just, well, I guess an hour to 2 hours is the time that I ended up spending on this entire ride from beginning to end. So I'm quite happy with how that turned out, especially given the amount of time and the amount of items that it took, because this is also, again, still very easy on the amount of items. Just some bushes and rocks as a way to highlight the natural terrain, but it's really the terrain which mostly shines in the coaster, and which I mostly wanted to shine as well, because that's really where the focus is here. So about half of the mine train is finished at this point. I still wanted to extend the pits that I have over here a little bit more, so that there's actually enough space to build your own stuff, like any kind of coaster that you want to have digging down there, if you feel the need to do that. And extend the coaster a little bit so that we're still burning through a tiny bit of speed until we actually hit the lift hill and go up to the station level again. We're actually going to need a second lift hill here, which is something that Dynamite Blaster didn't have, but there was just no way to get out of this situation without putting a second lift hill in, unless I wanted to make this coaster really short or make the lift hill super tall, but it already seemed quite tall. So in the end, there was really not much of another thing that I could do except for just make a second lift hill, which is definitely not the end of the world. Mine train coasters are a very typical element of mine train coasters is having multiple lift hills. So in the end, that's just a very positive addition to this ride as well. The only thing that I guess could hurt it a little bit is that in Planet Coaster, your excitement rating may very well kind of get hurt from having more of those downtime, like sort of moments like lift hills or brake runs, but in the end, it's too much of an important feature to forgo it here. So I'm just putting it in anyway. Now the final part of the mine train is more like a classical mine train, almost kind of like, I guess, the Quicksilver Express, which is a beautiful mine train in Gilroy Gardens. Excuse my pronunciation sometimes, but it's a really cool coaster that sort of winds through a nice forest. It's a very peaceful coaster. It's a small family kiddie coaster-ish thing with lots of flowers and great foliage, ground shrubbery on the sides. And a lot of the coaster is just very peaceful, calming, soothing. And that's how many of the very old mine train coasters used to be before we had all of these ridiculous Vekoma mine train coasters like Big Thunder Mountain and Expedition Everest. There were some of the first mine train coasters ever by Arrow, and later on also some mine train coasters by Morgan, like Quicksilver Express, which were much smaller, had those very slow, small lift hills, but were all around just very nice, soothing rides, and some of the first steel roller coasters that ever existed. So big ups to the mine train coaster actually for just being one of the realest roller coaster types out there. You may not like it, and it may be a very small, not so thrilling mine train experience most of the time, but it's really one of the oldies but really goodies in the roller coaster catalog. Anyway, I didn't mean to go full roller coaster nerdy there. I'm just trying to get some scenery in here, get a few rocks in there, actually work a little bit with the way that the textures work in Planet Coaster, and this is one of my favorite things. I actually really love the way that this works. You see, some of the textures in the game don't actually really like each other, so when you try to put them over each other, they're actually gonna like negate each other or not be affected by each other. Basically, the way it works, for instance, is if you place the dark, mossy, grassy color somewhere, and then you try and place the sand dune texture over it, the sand dunes are actually gonna only be placed until the point where the grassy color is, I guess, and wherever that grassy, mossy color is, you're not going to be able to place the sand dunes unless you hold down the texture button for a very long time. So what you can use this for is to kind of create these patterns where you can see some very clear borders between different kinds of material, so that not everything is a very smooth, like very subtle transition. It's very gradual, I guess, but you can also create these very sudden clashes between different textures. And I think especially if you're trying to go for that look of different kind of sands being dragged by the wind, or having places down somewhere where there could have been some water puddles left, or anything that really leaves a mark on a very changing landscape like that. I think it's a very interesting thing to have those textures kind of clashing like that. So that's something that I did quite a bit, actually, especially on the bottom of the pit here. Anyway, I'm totally running behind talking about textures. I also worked on the station, and I want to give a very special shout out over here. I'm not sure if you're going to be watching, but I want to talk a bit about Stuck71, who you might know from the Planet Coaster forums as well, because he used to be one of the guys in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 who made some very popular custom scenery sets. And one of his sets, or a few of his sets, I guess, but one of his sets that was very popular was SGR91, if I remember correctly, which was a set with modern sort of hangar roofs And that's something that I took some direct inspiration from for the station, to create those modern roofs that are being held up by cables from pillars and are suspended from the side. So that's the way that I built the station, and it's very much a homage to Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 custom scenery, since that was really one of the earlier sets and a very common kind of building style for many old Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 coasters. So I'm paying tribute to a lot of other things like old real-life coasters, Rollercoaster Tycoon 1 coasters, and Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 coasters with the mine train that I have over here. Now, just as a final touch for this area, and this is really for anybody who wants to try out and make some coasters go through this, I figured I had some open space still left, and it seemed really boring to just leave this open space be empty, grassy, flatland area, so I figured I might as well put a small ravine in there, so that you can possibly do some interaction with that. Try and see what it would look like if you have a coaster run through that. I think it would be pretty interesting, and it leaves a pretty interesting, almost scar-like mark on the landscape of the entire park as well. So yeah, just put that in there, and then got to some of the final foliage over here that should hopefully finish off this part of the park. And that was actually very quickly where you could see me using the darker mossy texture to kind of get some clashes with the sandy texture, as if the sand is kind of drifting all over the place and avoiding some places. Now, very finally, I wanted to do some detailing on the paths here, so I got my lanterns again, and I've got some of these planters again as well, and put some detailing in there to make everything come to life a little bit more, so that once we actually open these rides and people start going to this area, it's gonna end up looking like a real theme park area, kind of like the part with the Rocktopus and the pirate ship is already kind of looking. Anyway, that's it for today, so thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.